It's my favorite place on earth, and we turn into the lane, which was about a mile long.
Most favorite were the big, huge, I think they were willow trees that surrounded the big ranch house.
We went to visit the ranch. One of the really cool things was an artesian well.
We loved the artesian well, loved to get drinks out of it.
Recently reread my dad's autobiography. He said I was delivered by Ethel M. Walker on the 26th of October, 1936 at 3:36 a.m.
Grandma Ethel was very proper, and she came to a little ranch in the middle of nowhere in Nevada, so it was a real transition for her.
She always needed to be busy doing something, and I imagine she was a good disciplinarian. You would have to be.
I remember her grabbing Dickie by the ear and Roland by the ear with her other hand, twisting their ears and making them do what she wanted them to do.
I think she was very tolerant because those boys would horse around to the point where it was so much fun. It was hysterical, but it got crazy sometimes.
My Uncle Dick was the oldest, and there's my dad, Roland. Sylvan was very quiet, didn't talk much.
And Tim was the attention getter, the troublemaker.
The one that comes to mind is he and Roland decided to get the chickens drunk. So they got the liquor out of the house and took it out to the chickens, and they just laughed and laughed at the chickens falling all over themselves.
And Sharon, the princess of the family.
Well, the age gap between Roland and I was, maybe 15, 16 years. My memories of Roland on the ranch were I remember sweat just pouring off of his brow while he was bucking bales. And
so he's had this self-competitiveness. He seemed to always be kind of hard on himself.
I think he really looked up to his dad in terms of his work ethic, getting things done, being really good at stuff.
Growing up was a different era. You are to be seen and not heard kind of thing.
He was way more like his dad. Everything was about work. Everything was about getting work done.
So he described often going out and having to feed the chickens. He said there was about 1,000 chickens.
They would do cattle drives as he got a little older, and they would drive cattle to market.
But in its day, they ran about 1,000 head of cattle and 7,000 sheep.
We went to a one-room schoolhouse, and so we all went to school together.
And interestingly, Vesta was his school teacher for 1 month, who will come up later.
Mrs. Vesta Call Young was my third grade teacher for 1 month in Nevada. And then Mom went to stay with Grandma Burr in North Hollywood while Tim was born.
I do remember when the affair started. Vesta came and was a school teacher there. And she just kept trying to get my dad to take her she'd make up excuses for him to take her to the schoolhouse because she forgot something,
I never really thought about it. I have these aunts that are the same age as my aunt. And then it just all kind of fell into place. And I'm like, holy crap.
So my mother pretty much hung on my whole beginning of my life. She hung on for me to be raised on the ranch and to give the boys some security too. So for 10 years at least, hung on with the marriage and wouldn't give him a divorce. I know it upset Roland a lot, and but I don't remember him ever talking a lot against my father. I think he just honored him as his father. I think we all did.
Dad was a really forgiving, move-on kind of person.
Richard and Ethel got divorced, I think, when my dad was around 18 or 19.
He went to school in Southern California in Pacific Palisades, right by out of L.A. So he was there from the time he was 9th grade to 12th grade.
And then every June he would go back to the ranch and work his ass off all summer, then go back to school.
He was contracted with Swallow Ranches to buck bales that summer, pick up all the hay and stack it. He was such a hard worker, and he needed money for college.
I remember Roland with the big forks, grabbing the big bale of hay and loading it up onto the top.
And he would brag that he could bale on average about 500 bales of hay a day, which is just crazy.
I mean, it takes like almost a superhuman to do that.
I hauled 900 in one day. My goal was 1,000, but my body would not do more.
So at the end of the day, he would just be exhausted. I was only 11, but he decided that, okay, you're going to drive home. I'd learned a little bit about driving, but he really was the person who taught me how to drive.
When I was about 14 or 15, we decided to climb Mount Wheeler. So we start going down and it gets dark. Can't see much. Roland ran down the rest of the way to the Kerr Ranch, and he got a car and he drove as far as he could up the mountain. The thing that calmed us down is we could finally see the truck lights. It was pitch black. He's just responsible. You know, he's a good man. He was a good man.
Of all of my boy cousins, he was the most respectful to me as a woman, as a girl. I was the only girl in the elementary school when I was in first grade, and there was a lot of sexual harassment. Whenever I was around Roland, he never acted that way.
She taught him good values, and she was a good mom.
She was very, very healthy. She was slim. She would go swimming all the time. She would go to a dessert and say, "I'm just have a sliver."
The thing that we didn't like about her is she was always talking about eating healthy and how we had maybe gained an inch on her. She would sometimes like pinch our little roll. And the irony was that she took care of Sylvan and May's boys. She would call them my husky boys.
And then, you know, of course, I'm sure Becky's told you that every Christmas she gave us boxes of cereal.
Ethel would come over on holidays. You know, you buy oranges by the box, and it perfectly fit a box of cereal for each of us with our name on it, because growing up we had Wheaties, grape nuts, nothing with sugar. But she would bring over, you know, the sugar cereals that were so bad. Dad hated sugar.
My grandmother always was doing something, and I think that's where he got his book smarts from. She was very, very smart and a very well-educated lady. And I think that's where he got his passion for teaching, because she was a teacher as well.
He writes the first part of his autobiography for a class at school. As for a career, I'm most likely to be a rancher. I might see something that might change my mind. Making bobby pins, washing dishes, sewer cleaner, a bum. Let's see.
And then he went to Davis, University of Davis. He met a fellow there, and that's when he decided to join the church.
My dad's dad, Grandpa Swallow, was a baptized Mormon, but he didn't go to church.
It just wasn't really emphasized. George's father, Thomas Swallow, was a branch president in England for 20 years before he came. But by the time Grandpa was growing up at the ranch, I don't think it was at all. Although Grandpa did get baptized when he was 10.
And then after he divorced my grandmother, I think that's when he became active.
Then he tried to encourage my dad to go to church and get baptized, but my dad just really wasn't interested.
Roland just kept holding off until he was 21, I think.
When he was at University of California at Davis, he met a man, he might have been his roommate, who was Mormon, so my dad started learning more. At one point, he had a spiritual experience where he said he just felt tingly all over, and he'd never experienced that in his life.
He wanted to know the origins of the earth and what happens after life. And so I feel like that was a catalyst for him to join the church, because the church gave answers that he couldn't find elsewhere.
Roland came home from UC Davis, and he was, very sincere about his faith and practicing it correctly. And that sort of seemed to trigger many of his brothers, his Aunt Darlene, I always thought of Roland as sort of the inspiration or instigator of all of that religious revival.
His brothers and sister all looked up to him, and he was really the leader of that family.
He was kind of a spiritual leader. He led out in family history and things like that.
He had a whole room devoted to genealogy. And I remember walking in there as a teenager, and he had sheets everywhere and in piles and organized things. And I thought, how do you keep all this straight in your head? I mean, he loved family history from the time he was in 9th grade for some reason.
He had a dogged dedication to genealogy. It was feverish almost that he get it done quickly rather than in his retirement years.
When Dad first got into genealogy, the way you had to do it was you had to go up to the Salt Lake Genealogical Library. I was the gopher for Dad in the Salt Lake Library, and he would sit there and do genealogy, and then he'd say, okay, go find this one, and I'd go look for it.
He tried to get me interested. He did genealogy a lot. He was the one we relied on our in our family to do the genealogy. And he tried to get me interested. He even took me up to the genealogy library in Salt Lake. I had no idea what I was doing.
And decided he wanted to serve a 2-year mission for the church and teach other people about Jesus and what the church believes.
He went to the Northwest states. He was in Oregon, Washington, and so on.
But the biggest story was obviously that at some point on his mission, I don't think it was the last area, but near the end of his mission, he was assigned to St. Helens. And when he was in St. Helens, there was a young woman in the ward, and that was JoAnn.
As Mom recounts it, that she wasn't all that into him at the beginning.
But I know that she chose to go to BYU because he was there.
They just sort of seemed natural together.
When Esther and I were little, we didn't see a lot of regular affection. And so we were walking behind Mom and Dad up the sidewalk to the church house, and they were holding hands. And we just giggled and giggled that Mom and Dad were holding hands. When Mom had a hard day or she was tired, he would rub her shoulders for a minute and give her a big hug. This was usually seen in the kitchen.
They seemed to have their roles worked out pretty well. Mom did all the stuff with the kids in the house. Dad did everything else, did everything outside, brought home the paycheck.
Even though their roles were very different because she didn't work outside the home, it seemed like they were pretty equal in their share of what they did. They both worked really hard to take care of us.
Roland's day would begin with waking up before everyone, whipping up some wheat mush or oatmeal, which he would put in bowls on the countertop for our breakfast. He'd ride his bike to school, to his job, to save money, and he liked the exercise.
And he'd wear slacks, and he had this little cuff that he would put around one of his ankles so that it wouldn't catch in the wheel.
And we would listen very carefully for him to come home because we had to hurry and turn off the TV before he came in, or he would say something about it. Like, what are you doing? Turn that thing off. There's things to do, people to see, places to go. And if we didn't again, he would walk towards the closet, which held the paddles. But I never got spanked because I always turned it off in time.
We scrambled anytime we were not doing what we were supposed to, and Dad was suddenly home and wondering, why things weren't getting done.
If he was frustrated, he'd probably, go out and chop some wood or build something.
He would only really do things inside the house if he came home and things weren't done. Things were still messy, and he'd kind of do it in a huff. And he wasn't angry, but you could tell he was a little bit miffed that, things were a little dirty or there was dishes in the sink. So, but he never raised his voice about it. He just kind of hunkered down and did it real quick.
Sometimes we would be watching a show on TV and he would get pulled in And he'd sit there and watch for a few minutes. And, we're in the living room going, Dad's watching TV, And then after a few minutes, you'd hear, waste of time. He'd go out and shut the door.
You could start to triangulate why he wasn't super happy and why he would, go out and spend time by himself. Instead of being surrounded by kids who are wanting to watch TV, who aren't just like out there, being productive, painting something or building something, or
Always encouraging us to read. And, we had the World Book encyclopedias. If we ever asked him a question, he'd say, go look it up in the encyclopedia. Dad wrote in a poem to Mom that he wanted a lot of kids. He wanted 12. Luckily for my mother, I was cesarean, and she said enough is enough.
And it is enough to fill our lives with life.
Oh, the most impressive thing that my mom and dad did was raise 8 kids on a teacher's salary. Their resourcefulness and their hard work was so amazing.
I don't know how they pulled it off. Like 8 kids, no money.
You grew up on a ranch, and there's so many things to take care of, so many problems that come up. That gave him the confidence that when he was out on his own, he had his own house. And first of all, he felt comfortable building his own house because of the construction he had done on the ranch.
The thing I like to brag about my dad is that because he grew up on a ranch, he knew how to fix everything. He was a plumber, he was a carpenter, he was an auto mechanic, he was a welder. I mean, if he didn't know how to do it, he would figure it out.
He was inventive. He made a storage room downstairs and you'd roll the cans into it, which I thought was very clever. I think part of that's when you're a rancher, you have to find ways to do things,
Dad found an old refrigerator. He cut the back off the refrigerator and he buried it in the ground. So you go out there and you would lift up the door of the refrigerator and there would be, hundreds of potatoes sitting there all winter that you could go grab. And I guess it kept it insulated enough that they didn't freeze.
I became aware of his skill of being able to slaughter something when Becky Joe hit a deer. They called in the department, whoever picks up the dead deer, Department of Wildlife or something. He had waited a while, like an hour, and realized they weren't going to come. So he packed up the deer in the back of the Ford Courier and covered it up, brought it home, because it was not in season, of course. It was in season for Becky, but not for the rest of the state. And he had me come out and help. And then my dad just confidently removing each of the organs.
At some point, Mr. Swallow cooked a deer heart. In our classroom, it must have been like in a crock pot. I don't know if he was the hunter or someone else had hunted it, but he wanted us to know about a deer heart and how it tasted, and he shaved off little tiny slices of deer heart, and we all tried it and went,
I thought that was pretty cool that he knew how to do that, and from memory, he hadn't done it in 20 years. It's like riding a bicycle again.
I remember being on the side of the house and he was doing some work and I was pissed because we didn't have any money. I couldn't have something that I wanted. And I said something to the effect of, Dad, why are we so poor? And he paused and then he said, you will never know what real love is until you have kids.
All the money got spent on us, feeding us, making sure we had clothes, making sure we had what we needed. He wasn't spending any money on himself.
He would use his summers to make extra income instead of just taking the summer off.
He got a job as a usher at the Marriott Center after it was built. And so he got 2 seats, one for him and one for whoever, at every event where he ushered, which was all the BYU basketball games. I got to go to a lot of BYU basketball games for free.
So my dad got a gig with this restaurant called Marie Callender's, and they mowed lawns and kept up the area. Some summers he sold World Book Encyclopedia to make extra money.
For instance, he was a janitor at the Utah County building at night, and his job was to clean the first floor, empty the trash and everything. And I would go with him and help him empty trash and sweep hallways at night.
As far as their relationship goes, I don't think we saw a lot of negativity between them.
If they had a disagreement about something, it was basically shelved, taken offline. They didn't argue in front of us. I don't think a lot of people have the ability to just pause and say, let's do this elsewhere, not around the kids.
The only time I felt the tension in the home was when they disagreed about money.
So back then, men controlled a lot of a marriage, a lot of the aspects of the marriage, including money. And I do admire that he allowed her to completely take over the finances. It was all in her control. There were times that got her in trouble, where she bought a kitchen table that could actually fit all of us. And he wasn't too happy about that. That was a major fight, I remember.
I think I was around 12 when my dad decided to go back to school and get his master's. The reasoning I was told was that so he could get into education administration and make more money.
And it was a big deal. It was huge for him. He had hopes of that being the ticket to punch to become a principal or an assistant principal.
So the irony is that he got his master's to go into administration, and then as soon as he started to dip his toe into the administration waters, he was like, this is bullcrap. This is all politics. I don't want any part of it.
He didn't like the politics of it, and he just loved teaching. That was his real love.
In that process, he took some watercolor classes, and I think that really kick-started it for him.
There's a painting of the bridge that's down by Deseret Industries where it crosses over Provo River. There's some other paintings that he did. Those were all, I think, probably assignments that he had. The one, the painting of the Provo River bridge, I sat there next to him down on the rocks on the shore of the bridge.
Having that exposure, watching your father paint, and watching day after day, or week after week, when he would spend time on it, and to see a painting come to life, that was definitely sparked something in me to see the process of it. I really, really appreciate it, because it's been what my life has been about and will always be about.
I'm the only child that didn't have a painting specifically painted for me. My mom was always, saying, well, what about this painting? What about this painting? And all of these paintings that she had, because she felt really bad that Dad got sick before he could paint a painting for me. And I said, well, I'm really jealous that everyone else has a swallow painting. And she said, well, he donated a swallow painting to Westmore Elementary to hang on their wall. And I was like, well, I'm going to go in and just ask for it back. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, no, Mom, I'm mortified. I'm like 20 years old, 21. And I'm like, no, Mom, you don't do that. You don't go and ask for a painting back. But she did. She pulled their heartstrings and said, my daughter, she's the only one of 8 children that didn't get a painting by her father. And they said, oh, I think it's in this storage closet. And so they went and gave it to her, and the painting happened to be painted the year of my birth. So it really was for me.
Because he wanted each of us to have a painting of his. And I requested Wheeler Peak, which is a mountain near where he grew up, and a mountain I had climbed with him when I was a teenager.
He loved so much being an artist, and he wanted to share that with his students.
And it was amazing, the skill of those elementary school students. He was sophisticated in his teaching.
Okay, this is my duck that I drew. I was in 4th grade, so I was 10 years old when I drew this. It's pretty good. Not too bad, right? And he convinced me to, I had forgotten, but look, there it is. I won't show my address, but he convinced me to enter into the reflections competition at my school that year. That's just kind of the person he was. He was like, this is worth doing, and this is good enough, so why don't you try? And it didn't win, and that's okay, but he encouraged me anyway. So, got some dust on it, sorry. I won first place in the school art show. I don't even know what it's called. And it hung in this was in 1995, and I was in 5th grade. He put a label on the back for me.
I remember I was really happy when I got him as my teacher. I was really worried I was going to get one of the other teachers, and I don't remember why I was worried. All I know is he was like well known, and everybody wanted to have him as their teacher. One thing I liked about him, and I do remember very specifically, is he was into watercoloring and teaching his students how to watercolor. And I was not an artist at all. And I remember he said, you guys, I'm teaching you all how to watercolor. You're all going to be pretty good at it when we're done. And I was thinking, oh, it's not true, because I'm not artistic at all. And he also said, but you do have to get a special paintbrush. There's a special paintbrush you have to buy. I remember it still to this day. It was like pretty thick brush, and it was like mahogany colored handle. And I remember I was thinking, I was so lucky. I got this really fancy paintbrush I'm gonna be able to paint well with it. And I actually wasn't very artistic, but I felt like I did some pretty good, decent paintings because of Mr. Swallow. I always looked up to him. I thought he was like such a great guy. I always wanted to be like him when I grew up.
In high school, I would hear, kids would go, oh, your dad's Mr. Swallow. Oh, well, he was great. He was my favorite teacher. I'd hear stuff like that.
He's incredibly admired by his students. He's decidedly their favorite teacher, Why was he their favorite teacher? He would mix up the classroom. He would do his own curriculum. He wrote his own grammar curriculum.
He was a good teacher. I remember him giving me this folder that contained his work on developing a program for grammar that he had developed himself. So I just think he was always looking for he could do things to do better.
The ones that were always done first and just sitting around waiting for everybody else to finish. He basically taught them how to be tutors, how to be teachers' assistants, which is kind of the farmer-rancher mentality. You're always trying to find efficiencies. You're always trying to make things a little bit better.
Back then, they didn't have teachers that were assigned to be on the playground like they do now. Teachers wanted nothing to do with the playground. But he would go out almost every recess and lunch and go play with the kids, go play soccer, basketball, or whatever.
The day when the 6th graders and the teachers had a baseball game. Maybe it was softball. I do remember watching Mr. Swallow play. He hit like a home run, and we're all like, no, the 6th graders are going to lose again. Dang it.
There was a student that ran into Dad years after he had been in his class. And he said, I need to ask you, when I was in your class, I got in a fight and you were outside at recess and you didn't stop the fight. And Dad said, well, he was a bully and you were winning.
There were a couple of years there that he got really close to his students. It was when he went from teaching one grade to the next. So he had a class for the 4th grade, and then he had the same class for 5th grade.
Okay, so I had Mr. Swallow as my teacher at Cherry Hill Elementary in 1983 to 1984 for 4th grade. And then I was super lucky because he moved up to the 5th grade the next year, and I got to be with him again the following year. And we would love to talk in fake accents. And so we started out as he was Mr. Swallow, and then it became Moister Swallow, and then it became Oyster Swallow, and then it just went straight to Oyster. And by the end of our 5th grade year, we would just call him Oyster. And he was so cool about it. He just laughed and let us do it, you know, even though we were just dumb, silly kids.
When I was his student, I only had him for art class, so it was, I don't know, once or twice a week for an hour. I probably got to see a lot more of the fun side of Dad, though, because I would see him having fun with his students. Where at home, it wasn't always fun. It was, we've got stuff to do.
Yeah, I mean, I did feel jealous of his students, especially because I went to junior high and high school with them. And so when they would tell me stories about my dad, I would feel a little jealous that he got to spend that time with them and I didn't get a lot of time with them.
Which now, like, hearing about how he interacted with the students is really interesting because he was very interactive with the students. And I would say that he even got more like interpersonal with them, like interest in how they were doing, you know, what they were interested in, their family life, like that kind of thing. So there was some sort of disconnect there with his own children, which could be just practiced, or just could be him not realizing you can use those same skills as a teacher to interact with your kids. You don't have to mimic the way that Dick fathered you or the way that he interacted with you.
He was dedicated in anything he did. Sometimes I get the feeling that his kids felt he wasn't there for them.
Because the times with him were, you know, helping him on the roof. It wasn't, we were doing something fun.
If I had to guess, I was probably 6 years old, Joe, on top of a roof with tar paper, tar, nails. I joke with people like that I am probably a woman that could do most everything because my dad had us do everything.
If I wanted to spend time with my dad, I would go help him with whatever project he's working on. Because if you wanted to spend time with Dad, that's how you had to do it.
I found it like really, really boring to stand around and hand him stuff. I had no interest in it. I still have no interest in it.
Another story I was told from a nearby neighbor. They were up on the roof. Dad was walking by and he saw what they were doing and he said, "I'll be right back." And he went home and got the tools that he needed and he went back and started helping them with that. He didn't ask if they needed help. He just did it.
He knew every person on our block.
He was very curious about people and their stories. He was very social and friendly.
If anything needed to be done, he would, he was so busy and he had 8 children that he would always come and help.
Dad was service. He was all about service. And never once did he think about himself. You know, he was the guy who, after it snowed 8 inches in the neighborhood, he was where there were older people or widows or people who couldn't shovel their walks themselves, and then he would shovel theirs.
He knew of a mother who had just been divorced and didn't have a lot of money, and she was wanting to heat her home. Oftentimes in the winter, he would be over at her house chopping wood that he got from somewhere.
I've always thought it's really interesting that all of his brothers married single mothers. So I think Ethel did raise them to really, to look out for single mothers.
When I met Tim, I was divorced, and it was nice to have him be very understanding about it.
Sylvan and Dick, same thing. And Tim, all of them single moms. There is a pattern, and honestly, it does continue on with me as I've dated a lot of single mothers, married one.
When I moved into my mom and dad's house after my dad died, he wanted to help me with the house. There was a cracked sidewalk that led from the street to our porch. and he cracked up the sidewalk, the cement, and took it away. And then he laid a beautiful brick walk. And that has been 30 years or more, and it still is perfect. He laid it beautifully.
I was friends with some of the kids who he helped to take care of them and their mom. And he just made a big impact in their lives.
He would write down, everyone's birthday in the home, and he would take them a half gallon of ice cream on their birthday. And I thought that was so charitable. My dad loved ice cream. That was his favorite treat.
I miss the ice cream parties he had for my boys, like twins and my other boys, to see if they could eat a whole gallon of ice cream or a whole pint or whatever.
And he would always make us apricot smoothies. He had an apricot tree.
He loved taking care of crops. We planted an apricot tree in the front yard, and he made sure that that was all taken care of and watered and, harvested properly. And
I know he was gone a lot. He worked in the temple, and he was gone a lot helping people. I know he helped a lot of people other than me.
He was always about service, and temple service was the same. He was, for a long time growing up, it was every Friday night and Saturday morning he was at the temple. He loved singing in choirs. He was always in the church choir, in the ward choir. Loved to sing.
He loved being a part of the church. And so whether it be home teaching or genealogy or anything he could do to be good in the Lord's eyes.
Not only was he working, but he was also holding a church calling and sometimes two church callings. And so as I got older, I realized how busy he was and how much he took on.
He had so much going on. I think he struggled to know how to balance it all, but he felt such an urgency to get so much done.
When I became 8, that was the first summer that Dad took me out to drive the tractor. So at 8 years old, I was driving this tractor down the middle of the rows. I think Dad's approach was that's normal. That's what you do. Just because you're young doesn't mean that you're incapable of doing it.
So when my dad would take me to the ranch to work in the summer, I didn't know at the time that he was doing it for free. I just think he was extremely loyal to his father. I think he knew his dad was struggling to make ends meet. I got to even experience his dad, how he interacted with my dad and how he interacted with me. It was all about, the work that needed to get done. And that's kind of, he carried that on into our family.
Dad was not physical, like he put his arm around you or give you a hug or anything like that. Not at all. In fact, I don't think until I was 18 or 19 or something like that, it's the first time I think I can remember Dad giving me a hug. But Grandpa was even less.
I remember cornering him on the stairs one day when I was a teenager and looking in his eyes and saying, "I love you, Dad." Just staring him down, just daring him to say it back. And I can't remember if he seemed like he ended up mumbling it or something, but it was just hard. He wasn't raised in that culture.
Me and my whole childhood with my father, we never sat down and chatted. We never I don't remember having conversation, really. I remember maybe questions with simple answers, but like questions, like factual questions, like, what are you gonna do for this summer, or how many books are you gonna read this summer?
We never talked about dating or how I felt about anything. Yeah, that's kind of how it was, at least for me. I think he got softer as he got older with the younger kids.
I remember having a conversation with him. I was going through a really hard time in my life, and I think I wanted a different reaction out of him, like a more caring, thought out conversation, but it was as if he froze and didn't know how to communicate when someone was crying. I mean, when Dad got sick, I was probably 19 or 20. He wasn't a hugger. I remember that in that one instance, him hugging me.
The closest I got to having a heart-to-heart with my dad was when I came home from my first year in college, and I sat down with him and my mom and I talked to them about struggling with depression. And he said, well, yeah, your mom struggles with depression too. And I was basically told that I should probably pray harder and solve it spiritually, basically. And that was not very helpful at the time. He didn't know any better. And so I'm not angry, as I understand it. It really sucks that I can't talk to him about it right now. You know?
So easy to always want our parents to be more than they were. Yeah, just grateful that he was a good man and provided for us.
One time, we were all watching the Anne of Green Gables. I remember something happening. Maybe it was like a moment with her parental figure. I don't know if that's her dad or I can't remember. And I remember looking over and seeing my dad crying. Like he's not sobbing, but he had tears rolling down his cheeks. You could tell that he had this moment of Anne's reaction, her emotion in that moment, and then see his daughters in that. And I think it really hit him pretty hard.
I think Roland was a pretty sensitive guy, more than I ever realized before.
But something happened, I think, about the time that Don was over at Cherry Hill. Dad became more personable. He seemed more interested in having an emotional connection to us rather than just a stern father kind of, being, raise the family kind of approach. Like his dad. I think he realized that at some point he didn't really want to be like Grandpa. That he wanted to be different.
Maybe the older siblings got to have those conversations with him as adults.
A tender memory that I have of him is when I was 23, my boyfriend broke up with me and I was heartbroken. And he took me to school with him to help him just be with him for the day. I think he noticed I was sad. And I told him that my boyfriend had broken up with me and I was sad about it. And he asked why. And I said, well, he looks at me and my sisters and my mom and he, says we have a different culture regarding weight in our family. And he's, from a family where everyone stays thin. And my dad looked at me and he said, well, then he doesn't love you.
My dad's always been warm to me. And, especially when I was little, joking around with my dad at bedtime, him kind of being silly with me.
It was fun to see Dad as a grandpa and to have him be an influence and the example of a father to my son in his younger years.
But I can speak to the moment he got sick, actually. He had been sick for what felt like probably about a week. And Bronze and I were the only ones at home. And he was really sick, which he never really was. But he came up for dinner. I remember he sat against the wall, which I thought was really odd. Dad always sat, at the head of the table. And so he came in and he kind of scooted back to the back seats against the wall. And I hear Mom shriek calling his name. And I see that half of his face was kind of a little bit limp. I just yelled, call 911, call 911. And he was like, no, because he doesn't want to spend money. He doesn't want to go to the doctors. And I don't remember if Bronze called 911 or if Mom did so the ambulance came and took him away. And then within maybe like 8 hours, he was back at home.
I think later on Tuesday that I woke up and Mom said, you need to go downstairs and have Dad put on his robe and slippers. I'm taking him to the hospital.
He was still sick. And then I was walking to my college. It was about a 20-minute walk.
She had gone down to check on him that morning and he was talking gibberish. So I went downstairs, helped him get his robe and slippers on, and I told him that Mom was going to take him to the hospital. By the time we got his robe and slippers on, he said, "Why are we going to the temple?" And that really frightened me, that he couldn't remember and he thought he was going somewhere else.
Someone in our ward saw me walking and said, "Your mom said when I saw you walking by to tell you to hurry home." And that's when I found out he was back in the hospital again.
And I remember going over to the hospital to see him, and he was sitting on the bed, and then he laid down on the bed, and then he acted really silly. He acted like a kid, and I thought, what is wrong with him?
It was probably that evening that Dawn and I went to visit Dad in the hospital, and he told us, "I'm okay. Go do what you need to do. Live your life."
We took him on a little drive, JoAnn and I think one of his children. And we went into a mobile home for some reason. But anyway, he started smashing the window blinds, and JoAnn couldn't get him to stop. And then I realized that he's too much for her. My husband had Alzheimer's. If you're not around somebody all the time who has Alzheimer's or something that's not right in their mind, you don't understand how hard it is.
So I think when my dad got sick, everyone was just really hopeful. No one thought that it was our new normal.
When they released Dad from the hospital, the doctors said there's a 50-50 chance, just like a stroke, that his brain will recover and he'll have memory again.
My mom was really in denial. I remember her trying to learn new things and talking to people about how to fix it and, rehab. And for what felt like months, is we thought he would come home and that everything would be fine.
I think we held out hope for probably longer than was recommended to hold out hope for several months, and probably 2 years for me personally, that he would remember things. I would take art supplies and see if he could draw pictures or do things that he used to do.
One thing that I thought at the time of a shoulda, coulda, woulda is I felt really guilty not doing what he wanted, which Dad always said, if I lose my mind, I want you to take me to Mount Wheeler, put me in a hang glider, and just let me go. And whatever happens, happens. His biggest fear was not having his mind. And so that really sucks. That I felt like I just wanted to take him to Mount Wheeler,
Brain was really heartbroken. It was a big deal for him. It was really tragic for him. And he was basically his daddy that was there every day.
The infection progressed further. They realized it wasn't a stroke, and by the time they realized that, it was too late. So he'd already gotten the memory loss. And, I have some beautiful memories with him at that time because when I first went to see him, he didn't know who I was. And of course, that was devastating. He says, "I have a sister." And he was so excited that he had a sister. It's so sweet.
He had known me all my life, and we'd been good friends. He did not know who I was. And I would visit him. I used to visit him about once a week for maybe a year or two. And it was heartbreaking. He was gone. Just like that. Just gone for 15 years. It was horrible. It was horrible. And I don't know how JoAnn survived. I don't.
But I remember one time I went and I talked to him, and he's talked to me about JoAnn and his relationship. And he said, it seemed like, and it was almost like he was totally lucid. And he says, JoAnn and I made mistakes together, but the important thing is to learn from your mistakes. He said, it seems like whenever I was up, JoAnn was down, and whenever JoAnn was down, I was up. It was always opposite. And I thought, well, that sounds familiar. And I think I don't remember everything that he told me, but I just remember that it was like he was totally lucid or almost receiving instruction I needed from Heavenly Father or something, because it was just, I was almost in tears at that time, because I just thought, wow, I needed to hear that. I needed that advice.
Some people, when they get dementia, get angry and mean. My dad just got sweet and huggy, more affectionate, and that was nice. It was nice to see him smile, and he still tried to tell jokes and puns. That was always a thing, and he kind of kept trying to make puns, and he loved to sing. He still sang, and those were glimpses of him that were still there.
That's who I would have loved for my kids, my grandkids, to get to know the relaxed, silly dad. He was funny. He liked to joke around and have fun. Carrie and I lived with my parents for about 6 months before we moved to Texas, and my dad and Carrie would sit at the dinner table and have like a pun off, see who could tell the funniest pun.
You need a smaller tip, Dad.
If I described Roland in 1 or 2 words, I would say integrity.
Like, what he preached and what he did were in sync.
I know he loved me. I know he was a good man. I know he helped a lot of people.
Very hard worker, very dedicated, strong in the church. He was devoted to his family and his church. I don't know that he ever really spent a whole lot of time on anything that he wanted to do unless he was maybe painting, Seems like everything else he did was for us.
He was there for people in real ways. It wasn't lip service. He saw a need and he went after it.
In fact, he was one of my best friends my whole life. He was always looked after me and was good to me, and I always felt very comfortable around him. We just had a good time together.
He taught me that I didn't have to just do girl things. He didn't teach me to be a daddy's little princess.
And he was always there for me. For whatever situation I was in, he was always there to help me through it.
My dad taught me to be selfless. My dad taught me to be a hard worker. My dad taught me to teach by example.
My dad lived a full life. He just seized the day. He used all of his time doing what was important to him.
He'll be, remembered by thousands of kids that just made them think about learning in a different way. So sweet, silly, peaceful guy. I was pretty stoked to be his son.